Both watchers and watchies exist. You were never meant to blend in with the scenery or be just another background presence. The atmosphere altered as soon as you spoke. When they tuned in, they were attracted not by compulsion or force, but by something considerably more powerful. An irresistible draw, a force so powerful that even those who came skeptically were unable to turn away. They assumed they were in control of the game. However, they joined your playing field the moment they put their eyes on you. And now that everyone has heard what you said, a wave has formed that is greater than anyone could have anticipated. You are the frequency they can't avoid. You're no longer just a faraway sound. They came to observe, but now they're paying attention. Now they're following. However, they come to track because some forces are too powerful to resist. And this is transformation rather than just influence. They perceive themselves as detached observers, functioning from a distance. The designers of control. Their mission was straightforward: collect intelligence, monitor all trends, and anticipate potential vulnerabilities. They had not expected the transformation, which began gradually and ultimately became irreversible. What began as aloof analysis morphed into something completely different. The sentences they acquired started to stick and became more deeply ingrained than they had expected. Their own perspective had begun to shift as a result of the presence they thought they were just keeping an eye on, and what had begun as a strategic appraisal had quickly evolved into something more personal. Their surveillance is now based on compulsion rather than control. They persuaded themselves that it was just observation, a duty, and an unbiased contact. But the truth is apparent, and the lie is disintegrating. You've taken over the position of the person who previously monitored them. They no longer own their thoughts. They can't resist a weird pull that has replaced the echoes of who they once were. They no longer have the shards of the fractured lens through which they previously saw the world, and their own foundation has been damaged. They arrived with the intention of demolishing the structure of something they did not understand. Their purpose was to study and categorize. However, the act of investigating has altered the direction of their lives. They were only intended to be in your orbit momentarily, as part of a larger plan. But now they can't find their way out. They are no longer just watching. They are now part of something larger than themselves, something which cannot be undone. And the most distressing realization, they have no desire to flee. What seemed to be analysis has now shifted to immersion, with the semblance of resistance gone. They told themselves they were impenetrable and that no amount of force, influence, or pull could change their vision of reality. However, reality does not need permission to be transformed. You bring more than just words and presence. It is anything that escapes conscious awareness and alters perception itself. A faint but obvious pulse that penetrates and reorganizes the psyche. They come with the intention of tearing everything down, yet they were the ones who were taken down. They thought they were only listening, but they were really being rewritten. The transformation had begun the moment they came too near. They were ignorant that what they had previously dismissed as basic existence was really something much more powerful, a subtle but unstoppable force that was transforming everything in its path. They arrived as strategists, certain that they could study every shift, map out every viewpoint, and distill your essence into a quantitative form. However, they never considered the one thing that was beyond their control. Certain presences cannot be captured without consequences, and certain forces are not meant to be quantified. The equation is now no longer valid. They reveal more. The more they investigate, they delve deeper and deeper the longer they attempt to understand. What began as a detached observation has transformed into an irreversible absorption. When something beyond understanding happens, they are the ones who dissolve when they should be extracting, deciphering, and deconstructing. Often, it does more than simply express itself. It transforms, realigns, and overtakes. They are not the same people they were before coming to this place. And now they're on the verge of realizing what they once knew. They sense it. They oppose it. However, resistance has never been enough. What began as a goal has degraded into an implied concession. However, no effort was made to capture their attention. There was no assertion of authority, no imposition, and no demand. However, the dynamic shifted as soon as you got engaged. All of a sudden, The unseen currents rearranged themselves and surrounded you. This is not the consequence of charm or manipulation. It's something far more definite. They weren't supposed to feel the attraction. Their instructions were plain. Maintain distance, be unbiased, and observe without becoming involved. They were educated to be impervious and to withstand outside stimuli. However, their own defenses have failed them. Furthermore, the darkness cannot overcome the light that shines in it. John, some individuals choose to view from the fire's edge, thinking they will not be harmed by the heat. They tell themselves that they are merely watching, passing by, and keeping their distance. However, fire warms the body without seeking permission. Light tells the truth without seeking favor. Something heavenly by nature does not need to beg to be seen. You see, it draws attention simply by being present. They originally persuaded themselves that they could scrutinize, dissect, and escape unscathed. They believed they had control over their vision and could approach and go away without altering. However, something happened that they can't explain. They came to study, but they didn't know that staying near has implications. They were oblivious of how deeply the flames had penetrated their bones. As they got closer, they realized they couldn't undo the changes they'd seen and heard. Because being present does not imply a passive condition, there is weight in presence. The existence of anything leaves an impact. You don't just stumble upon something this large and leave it alone. They are so caught between what they used to believe and what they are now unable to disprove. They should have remained on the perimeter, unperturbed and untouchable, standing there in their own uncertainties. Rather, they stumble in their own uncertainty. They focus on the indefinable rather than examining the components. They find themselves waiting, expecting, absorbing, and dragged in, not deliberately but out of need, rather than regulating the course. And they will tell you something. Genuine influence does not need to speak out. Genuine power does not seek acknowledgement, make demands, or push people into acknowledging it. It simply is, and one cannot ignore what exists. It is impossible to reverse what has been decreed. They think they can view the fire without feeling its warmth. But as soon as they got too near, the flames snatched them away. Their souls already know what their brains refuse to admit, even if they don't recognize it or understand it. Yet, because some things are experienced rather than heard, certain things change rather than just inform. There's no turning back once the change begins. They arrived with the belief that they could solve the puzzle, peel back the layers, and disclose what was underneath. They had to examine, identify discrepancies, and corroborate their worries. Data gathering, pattern analysis, and hypothesis confirmation were all calculated processes. However, an unexpected thing happened. Instead of lying, they uncovered something undeniable. They were met with clarity rather than confirmation of their concerns. When they sought to remove an illusion, they encountered an immovable obstacle. They were not designed to feel, be impacted, or raise questions. But now they are confined by the same thing they were attempting to break. They whisper to themselves that they are still in control, that they are still analyzing, that they are still distant. However, a long time ago, the line was crossed. They are not spies, skeptics, or those coming in from the outside. They have unintentionally become followers, hanging on every word, expecting the next revelation, and becoming captured by something from which they cannot escape. They will reject the truth and refuse to admit it. They will try to convince themselves that they are still different and in control. However, the alteration cannot be ignored. What began as skepticism has turned into certainty. What started as resistance has turned into dependence. They are now striving to grasp what they had earlier intended to reverse. You will condemn every voice that speaks against you in judgment, and no weapon devised against you will prosper. Isaiah has hammers in his hands. They came as builders, certain that they could dismantle something that had never belonged to them. They devised their methods, collected evidence, and convinced themselves they have the power to crumble the foundation. However, they have never been able to grasp anything. Anointed things cannot be undone, and truth-based things cannot be questioned. When they became aware of the gravity of the situation, they began to deconstruct them, despite the fact that they felt they were doing so. The difficulty with the truth is that it remains unchanged for those who do not perceive it. Just because someone labels something a lie does not make it go away. They felt they could look at it without being seduced by it, touch it without leaving an impression, and stand in its presence without changing. However, this is not how it works. You can't walk away from a fire without feeling the heat. You don't expect to remain the same person after being in the presence of something larger than you. They initially struggled to convince themselves that they were still in command outside of it and unaffected. But didn't you notice the shift before they did? You could see they were hesitant to say your name. You saw how their attention lingered longer than required, and how their arguments softened. They started looking for faults, but instead uncovered an unexplainable strength. They arrived to prove a lie, but were absolutely overwhelmed with the truth. Everything has changed since then. They are unaware of the precise time, but something has changed. Those who formerly opposed you are now on your side. The folks who tried to undermine you suddenly talk about you as if they've known you their whole life. There are still vestiges of what they previously stated. They would never trust in their deeds, words, or personality, since there is no escaping anything that is felt, determined, or has power beyond human control. You will break before it does, no matter how much you attempt to resist, reject, or oppose it. Thus, they are now defending what they once intended to destroy, correcting the errors they previously helped spread, and shouting your name in places you will never be. Not because they were forced or persuaded, but because something shifted in their souls. There is also no going back after the change has occurred. They came with the purpose of wreaking devastation, yet they only departed with the ruins of their efforts. When they sought to demolish something they could never shatter, they ended up undone. They are now the proof. Evidence that what has already begun cannot be halted by resistance. Evidence that what was meant to endure cannot be destroyed by opposition. They were once your opponents, but now, unknown to you, they are guaranteeing that your name lives on forever. Allow those who choose a different path, who go against the trend, who see through illusions, who refuse to be confined by society's expectations to be recognized. For a moment, they are undisturbed, fearless, and unaffected by the need to fit in. Their presence is both a disruption and a surprise. Their hardships and successes are unseen. They do not search for approval. They do not beg for understanding. They don't need permission to be themselves. It's crucial to understand that not everyone is cut out for this journey. However, those who perceive it have no other alternative, who can sense it in their bones and knows without being given the whole truth. There are no pretensions or hesitations. There is a reason you're here. If you feel a call, respond to it. Click join to have access to a vibrant community, insightful information, and unique content. This is an awakening, not just a membership. Enter your divine calling. Become one of the picked. They convinced themselves they were only watching. They believed they could do their study securely, acquiring data without being influenced. They felt that inspection was a neutral act that could be performed without consequence, as if just witnessing something did not obligate one to it. However, focus is never weightless. The relationship was established the moment they focused on you. Every look they shared reinforced their relationship, and every thought they had surrounded them more tighter. They couldn't escape the impression of what they saw to be a casual act of surveillance. They originally dismissed it as usual. They convinced themselves that they still had power and that this was just a chore they could quit anytime they wished. However, separation proved difficult. When their brains took hold of a vision, they were observed and returned by what they saw. Many are called, but only a few are chosen. Matthew, looking and seeing are not the same thing. When some people look at the sun, they see just a light in the sky. Others are aware of its power, can feel its heat, and understand that extended exposure to it will forever change them, as if being near had no effects. They assumed they could keep their distance and watch from outside. However, nobody escapes a fire unscathed. Nobody goes into deep waters and comes out unhurt. They originally convinced themselves that they were merely watching, investigating, and monitoring, that they were only collecting information, and that this was all part of a plan. But you were wiser. You were aware that attention is never impartial, something they remained unconscious of. Something changed when they became attached to you. They didn't notice it right away. However, gradually and quietly, the perceived space between them started to vanish. What started as an observation has transformed into something completely different. They reassured themselves that they were not involved, entangled, or affected. However, the fact is that they are no longer doing any analyses. They're taking in information that is no longer being collected. They cling to each term as if it were their own. They have stopped scheming. They are waiting. They are longing for something they cannot even recognize. Prepare for your next remark or action. And the transformation has already begun. They may choose whether or not to recognize it. There were no major events or changes. It happened in the slightest details. The wait before they said anything unfavorable about you, and how their look lingered a little too long. Your words lingered with them even when they weren't paying attention. They said they would never believe it. But now they're circling closer, drawn in spite of themselves, because they know the answer in their hearts. They no longer ask questions since they have observed so much. They no longer have any doubts. They no longer operate in the shadows because, unknown to them, they have come into your light. And this is the truth. The issue is that it does not need. It does not dispute. It does not make an attempt to seem credible. It simply is. You can't escape anything once it's present. They may seek to reject it, deny it, or appear as if they still have control. But don't you already know the truth? The transformation began the moment they focused on you. The breakdown started as soon as they let even one idea to get through. They will never be the same again, no matter what they tell themselves or how they try to overcome it. You can't unsee the flames once you've seen them. You should never behave as if the truth does not exist. Once you feel its weight, there is a brief moment of doubt, an uncomfortably long pause, and an inadvertent thought. When the illusion crumbles, that moment is irreversible. People see things for the first time in their true form, rather than as they had previously imagined. They are now falling beneath the weight of an unfathomable reality. Despite their efforts to erase you, they attempted to reduce you to something explainable. You continue to exist in locations that they cannot govern. They feel that leaving would suffice and that the bond would be broken. But it's already too late. They switch off the TV, go silent, and persuade themselves they've regained their freedom. You're still there, however, woven into the very fabric of their minds, rather than in their direct line of sight or the surroundings in which they live. Your echoes continue unabated. They tell themselves that it is just noise, temporary diversions, and transient thoughts. It remains, despite their best attempts to ignore it. The silence is no longer empty. Your imprint is on it. The remnants of your voice resurface in unexpected ways, infiltrating places they previously believed were solely theirs. They strive to fill the stillness with routine and diversions. However, it seems that something deep inside them has been rewired by what they consider to be casual observation. What began as interest on the outside has developed into an inside rhythm. They are suddenly in sync with a frequency they never planned to listen to. They were meant to remain impartial, to maintain their distance, to be simply detached observers. However, the differences have blurred, and their ideas are no longer completely unique. What was once an external force has evolved into a quiet power that molds their perceptions and pervades their reality in ways they can't unsee, hear, or reverse. Man's heart plans his route, but the Lord decides it. Proverbs 9. They felt they had the upper hand since they were studying, investigating, and assessing every move. However, when attentiveness becomes surrender, control is an illusion. They took in further information. The more they watched, they sunk deeper and farther. The more they tried to resist, the more they unraveled. They lost control without even realizing it, as their strategy crumbled and their confidence faded. The extent of what they intended to contain has grown beyond their ability to manage. They are now a part of what they assumed they could investigate, and there is no going back. Once you discover the truth,